Have you ever felt that subtle pull? Something keeping you from making a big change, even when you sort of know it's time. Maybe you've thought about selling your house, downsizing, moving closer to the kids, or maybe chasing a new job offer somewhere else, only to feel, well, stuck. Just inexplicably stuck. And it's not just about the crazy high interest rates right now or, finding a new place to land. For literally millions of homeowners, there's this silent financial force, almost invisible, an unexpected cost acting like an anchor, just keeping their homes off the market. So today, we're pulling back the curtain on this phenomenon. Some people are actually calling it a hidden home equity tax. It's quietly reshaping, well, everything about American homeownership, and it's definitely contributing to this housing market mess we're in. Lowest sales in 40 years, where owning a home feels increasingly like a pipe dream for so many.
Yeah, and the ripple effects are not just like abstract economic theory. They're real. When homeowners can't or won't move, it really tightens up inventory. Prices go up. And it slows down everything else, too. People moving for jobs, communities changing and growing.
Yeah.
It's profound. It really signals a big shift in how we think about our homes. Not just shelter, but this asset with this unseen burden attached.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then. Today, we're doing a deep dive into these really complex, often hidden forces that are shaping the housing market. We've got a bunch of sources here that, frankly, reveal some pretty surprising truths. And our mission really is to help you understand what all this means, not just for the big economy picture, but for your personal finances, your housing choices. We're going to tackle two main things today. Both are quietly but dramatically changing who can buy, who can sell, even what houses are actually available. First, we're going to shine a really bright light on that federal capital gains tax on your main home. It's often overlooked, but it turns out it's a huge reason people don't sell. A massive disincentive. Then we'll switch gears completely. We'll look at something brand new, the surprising impact of those buy now, pay later loans, specifically how they're starting to affect your credit score and, yeah, your chances of getting a mortgage. So get ready. Some of this might really change how you see the housing market, both now and down the road.
The hidden home equity tax. Trapping homeowners in place.
All right, so let's start with this sort of quiet epidemic. Trapped homeowners. Just imagine, you've owned your place for years, maybe decades, right? You bought it way back when, maybe got one of those super low interest rates you just can't touch today. You've kept it up, maybe done some work on it, watched the value climb, sometimes it climb like crazy. So you're sitting on a ton of equity, which is great, right? Maybe you're generally happy there, but, life happens. Things change. Maybe the kids flew the nest and that big family house feels, well, too big now, echoey. Or maybe you're getting older and, frankly, stairs are becoming a bit of a nightmare. Or, hey, maybe that dream job popped up clear across the country. Or you just want to change the scene. But then you start doing the math. You look at buying something new at today's prices, today's rates, and suddenly the mortgage payment looks like double, maybe triple what you pay now. Ouch. And you definitely don't want to give up that amazing low rate you locked in years ago. No way. And then comes the kicker. The potential tax bill. Just for selling the house you've lived in forever. So what happens? Your house and millions just like it, they become effectively locked up, stuck. They're not listed for sale. They're not changing hands. And this puts a massive squeeze on housing supply, especially for those established family homes lots of buyers are desperately looking for.
Yeah. What's really striking is how deeply this hits supply. It's profound. You hear reports, right? Overall inventory might be creeping back towards pre-pandemic levels in some areas, but a huge chunk of what could be for sale, it's just staying off the market, stubbornly off market. And it's not just the high rates, though that's part of it. That's largely driven by this very specific tax issue, this disincentive. The National Association of Realtors, they put out this number recently. It's kind of staggering. Roughly 1 in 3 homeowners in the U.S., okay, that's about 29 million people, have built up more equity in their home than the current federal capital gains tax exclusion protects when they sell their main home, I mean. Just to give you a sense of scale, 29 million people, that's almost the entire population of Texas facing this exact situation.
And here's where it gets, frankly, kind of alarming. The long-term forecast. By 2030, they expect that number to jump to 56% of homeowners. 56%, just let that sink in. Over half of all homeowners in the U.S. could be looking at a big federal tax bill just for selling their primary residence. This isn't some niche problem for, the super rich and fancy coastal cities anymore. It's fast becoming a mainstream issue. It's going to directly hit the majority of people who own a home in America. It's this hidden tax, right? This home equity tax that most people just haven't planned for. It's this surprise hit to your finances that often only shows up, like you said, at the closing table. By then, it's way too late to easily do anything about it. It's like discovering a huge exit fee right as you're trying to leave. Okay, so let's break down how this tax actually works. The capital gains tax on your main home. Because understanding the rules, the exact rules, is really key to seeing why it's become such a big problem. So the current federal rules, on paper, they seem pretty simple. If you're single, you get a $250,000 exemption on the profit. Let's say you bought a house for, I don't know, $100,000. Years go by, you sell it for $350,000. Your profit is $250,000, right? Under the rule, you owe zero federal capital gains tax. Your profit fits perfectly in the exemption. But anything over that $250,000 profit, that part gets taxed. Now, if you're married and filing jointly, that exemption doubles. It's $500,000, so same idea. A couple buys for $100K, sells later for $600K. That's a $500,000 profit. Again, zero federal capital gains tax.
Right, but the critical thing here, the part that catches so many homeowners completely by surprise, is that while those numbers, $250K, $500, might sound like a lot of money, they haven't kept up, not at all, with how much home prices have exploded. Think about someone who bought their house 10, 20, maybe even 30 years ago. Back then, making a $250,000 or $500,000 profit on your house, that seemed almost impossible, like winning the lottery. They naturally assumed their gain would easily, fall into those limits. No problem. But fast forward today, after decades of just unprecedented appreciation in many areas, homes bought for what seemed like modest sums back then are now routinely selling for hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, more than the original price. And this means a lot of homeowners are suddenly facing a really substantial tax bill when they never, ever planned for. It turns what should feel like a windfall into this major financial headache. It's a surprise that, often makes selling seem really unappealing, maybe even impossible, right, when they're trying to make that decision.
And here's where it gets truly interesting and maybe a bit maddening if you've owned your home for a long time. These tax exemption rules, the $250K and $500K limits, they were last updated, wait for it, in 1997. Just think about that year for a second. Back in 97, the average house price in the U.S. was around, $180,000, something like that. Making a $250,000 profit on your house seemed almost mythical for most regular folks back then. The market was just completely different.
Exactly. And that's the fundamental disconnect right there. If you look at the big picture, the flaw is just glaringly obvious. These exemptions haven't been tied to inflation at all. Or, even more critically, they haven't tracked the insane run-up in home prices. Since 1997, home prices across the U.S. have climbed over 260%. 260%. Let me put that differently. Homes today are, on average, worth more than 3.5 times what they were when these tax rules were written. And yet the exemption amounts, exactly the same, frozen in time. If, and this is a big if those exemptions had just kept pace with inflation and home price growth, a single person selling today would have an exemption around $660,000. And for married couples, it would be a whopping $1.32 million. You're nowhere close to those numbers. It just hammers home how incredibly outdated these rules really are.
Wow. You can just imagine the impact, right? The disconnect. Our source actually throws out this really compelling thought experiment. What if? What if Congress actually updated these rules tomorrow, lined them up with today's reality, maybe doubled them, tripled them, something significant? The prediction is we'd see a flood, a massive flood of homes hitting the market almost overnight. Think of all those millions of homeowners just sitting on these appreciated houses, kind of held hostage by this big potential tax bill. Suddenly, they'd be free to sell. The disincentive is gone, or at least greatly reduced. So what does that mean for unlocking inventory? It strongly suggests that a huge amount of potential housing supply is just frozen right now, locked up. Not because people don't want to move, but because they don't want to pay a tax that feels, frankly, unfair, like a penalty for building wealth in their own home under conditions that have changed dramatically. It's just a massive drag on the whole housing market's dynamism. And this problem, this hidden tax, it also doesn't hit everywhere equally, not even close. Its impact is way worse in some states than others.
Yeah.
It really depends on how much property values have shot up. Take Hawaii, for instance. They're in the toughest spot right now. Something like 79% of homeowners there could face this capital gains tax if they sold today. Nearly 8 out of 10. Washington State is up there too, around 65%. Now compare that to, say, West Virginia or Mississippi. There, it's only about 8% of homeowners who typically need to worry about hitting that limit. So yeah, where you live makes a huge difference in whether this tax is even on your radar.
And the financial hit from this difference, also pretty significant. It varies wildly. Across the whole country, the average federal tax bill for homeowners who go over the limit is around $35,000 right now. Okay, $35K is not nothing. But in those states where prices have gone bonkers, the numbers get much scarier, much faster. Like in Hawaii, the average homeowner who goes over that single filer cap, they have an additional $49,000 plus in profit that's subject to tax, on average.
Which means, yeah, a homeowner in Hawaii could easily be looking at a six-figure tax bill to the IRS just for selling their house. That's not pocket change. That's retirement savings wiped out. That's a down payment on the next place gone. Poof.
Right. And then just to pile on, if you happen to live in a state like California or Hawaii again, that also has its own state level capital gains tax, the burden just gets heavier. It compounds. So you could be hit with a federal and a state tax bill just for selling the house you've lived in and taken care of. You can see why a lot of people feel like it's fundamentally unfair. Like they're being punished for doing the right thing, for owning property, maintaining it, watching it grow in value. This layered effect, federal and state, it creates this really powerful reason for people to just stay put, no matter what, even if the house isn't right for them anymore. So, okay, if you're a homeowner facing this big, maybe unexpected tax bill just for selling your main home, what do? Our sources point to a strategy that's surprisingly common, almost like a default reaction for many. They just hold on to the house until they die. It might sound a bit extreme, right? But when you look at the math, the financial hit of selling, it actually becomes a pretty rational choice for a lot of people.
And this decision, this dial the home strategy, leads us straight to a really critical concept for anyone who might inherit property. It's called the stepped-up basis. This is a huge tax advantage. Here's how it works. When someone inherits a property, the cost basis, that's the value used to figure out capital gains tax, gets stepped up. It resets to whatever the fair market value of the property was at the time the original owner passed away. Let's use an example, because this really shows the power of it. Imagine a house bought 30 years ago for $100,000. Today, it's worth a cool $1 million, $1 error. If the original owner sells it today, even with their exemption, they're facing a massive capital gains tax on that $900,000 profit, minus their $250K or $500. Still a big chunk of change. But if that owner passes away and their kid inherits the house, the kid's cost basis instantly becomes $1 million, the value on the day they inherited it. So the heir would only owe capital gains tax if they've then sold it for more than $1 million, significantly more, like $1.25 million if they're single or $1.5 million if they're married, using today's exemptions. It's an enormous tax break.
Decades of appreciation, just poof, wiped clean from a tax perspective. It passes tax-free to the next generation.
Wow. And what does that strategy, used by so many, mean for the housing market overall? It means homes stay locked up, off the market, for generations sometimes.
Our source mentions seeing this clearly in places like Northern California. Homes staying in the same family for 30, 40, even 50 years is not uncommon there, which, yeah, obviously restricts inventory even further, but it also contributes to those incredibly high home prices in desirable areas. Fewer homes turning over means more competition for what is available. It's systemic, right? It affects market dynamics, but also like the social fabric. It hinders mobility. It makes it harder for younger folks to find affordable places in established neighborhoods.
There's another strategy homeowners use too when facing this capital gains issue: borrowing against the equity. This is a really key distinction. Selling creates taxable income from the profit. Borrowing, that's taking on debt. Debt isn't income, so it's not taxed. Our source points out this can make a lot of sense, financially speaking, if the only other option is selling and getting slammed with that big tax bill. So people take out things like home equity lines of credit aid OOCs, or they do a cash-out refinance. It lets them tap into the wealth they've built up in their home without actually triggering a taxable event. They get cash, but no immediate tax consequence. Of course, the big caveat, like with any loan, you absolutely have to be able to pay it back comfortably. You don't want to end up in financial trouble, or worse, risk losing your home to foreclosure. So it's not free money, but it is a way to get liquidity without the tax hit.
So all of these forces, the tax, the high rates, the desire to keep low rates, it leads to what our source really accurately calls the penalized to stay or leave dilemma. Homeowners are just caught. It's a financial catch-22, right? They feel penalized if they stay. They're stuck in homes that just don't fit their lives anymore. Think about someone elderly, late 80s, maybe 90s, living alone in a big 2-story house. Maybe they physically can't use the second floor anymore. Stairs are impossible, so their life shrinks down to just the first level. But they can't sell or won't sell because of that potential tax. So they're paying property taxes and insurance on a much bigger place than they need. Costs keep rising, maybe even exceeding what their old mortgage payment used to be years ago. They're stuck maintaining a property that's maybe physically challenging or just a financial drain. It eats away at their resources, their energy.
And that really brings up a crucial point about quality of life, doesn't it? And maybe even societal support. You have homeowners stuck in these houses that are maybe hard to maintain, costly, or just way too big once the kids are gone. The emotional toll, the physical strain of staying in a place that doesn't work anymore, it could be huge. It could affect their health, their ability to socialize, their overall well-being. It's kind of a quiet crisis for many older homeowners financially trapped in homes that just don't serve them well anymore. And it contributes to bigger issues like loneliness, reduced mobility.
Right. And then the other side of the coin, they feel penalized if they leave. Because leaving means selling, which means potentially paying that huge capital gains tax. So neither choice feels good. You either stay put in a house that's not right, stretching your budget, maybe your physical limits, or you sell, pay a massive tax bill, and then face the daunting task of finding something else you can afford, something suitable, in today's incredibly expensive market. It's this dilemma that creates so much inertia. It slows down the natural churn of the housing market, that healthy flow of inventory, and it contributes to this feeling that the market is just stagnant, gridlocked, and out of reach for so many. So where do we go from here? What's the future look like? Our source is pretty clear. Government action is needed, urgently. Raising those capital gains limits seems like the obvious first step. Even if they don't immediately jump to those ideal inflation-adjusted numbers, the $660 for single, $1.32 members for married any increase would be better than nothing. Way better. And the argument makes a lot of sense. Even a modest bump would likely unlock a significant amount of inventory. It removes that main financial roadblock for many longtime homeowners. Plus, there's this interesting angle. It could actually bring in more tax revenue than the current system.
How's that?
Because right now, a lot of that potential revenue is lost forever through the stepped-up basis when people die holding the property. The government gets zero tax on decades of appreciation then. If higher exemptions encourage some selling before death, the government actually collects some tax rather than none. So releasing some of that trapped equity could be a win-win, potentially.
And looking further out, say to 2035, the projections really underscore how this problem is escalating. It's not shrinking. Data suggests that 13 states could see 90% or more of their homeowners exposed to federal capital gains taxes by then. 90%. And what's really fascinating, or maybe alarming, is that this includes states that used to be seen as affordable havens, places like Florida, Nevada, Arizona. So yeah, this isn't just a California or New York problem anymore, not by a long shot. It's rapidly becoming a truly nationwide issue. The sustained, widespread rise in home values means this hidden tax is just expanding its reach dramatically. It's building up pressure under the surface that eventually has to be addressed, either through policy changes or, well, just through time passing.
Exactly. And ultimately, our source makes this really powerful, almost unavoidable point. Whether the government acts or not, ideally they would, right?
Sure.
Or whether it just happens through the slow, steady march of demographic change as older generations pass on, a huge amount of housing inventory is statistically guaranteed to come onto the U.S. market over the next couple of decades. It's not an if, it's a when. It's baked into the demographics. So while things feel really tight right now, really restrictive, there is this massive long-term shift coming. It's on the horizon, and it could totally reshape the housing supply landscape for years to come.
The unexpected impact of buy now, pay later on housing.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Let's pivot to something completely different, but also really significant for the housing market, especially if you're out there actively trying to buy a home or even just thinking about it down the line. So what does this mean for your ability to actually get a mortgage? Well, it turns out that super popular payment method, buy now, pay later, BNPL, that tons of us use all the time, maybe without even thinking much about it, it's about to have a major impact on your credit score and consequently on your financial future. FICO, the company behind the credit scores most lenders use, just made a huge announcement. They are officially going to start including buy now, pay later loan information in their newest credit scoring models, FICO 10T, I think it is. This is a massive deal, a game changer, really, because it's the first time these kinds of short-term installment loans will be factored into traditional FICO scores in such a direct, comprehensive way.
Yeah, if you zoom out and look at the big picture, this is a really monumental shift because BNPL usage has just exploded. Absolutely exploded in the last few years. It's become incredibly easy, super convenient for people to finance, well, almost anything. Groceries, clothes, electronics, concert tickets, travel. You name it. It lets people spread out payments, buy things maybe they couldn't afford all at once up front. And for a long time, it operated kind of in this gray area, outside the normal credit reporting system. But its sheer size now, plus some worrying trends we're seeing, has clearly pushed FICO to say, okay, we need to include this to get a truly accurate picture of someone's debt.
Right. It's important to get the nuance here, though, because BNPL often feels different than swiping a credit card, doesn't it? But the reality is it's still debt. Plain and simple. It's money you owe someone for something you got now but haven't fully paid for yet. Our sources mention examples like DoorDash partnering with Klarna so you can get your food delivery now, pay later. Or even online grocery stores offering BNPL at checkout for your weekly shopping. It's everywhere. And honestly, for those of us watching consumer credit, it feels almost surprising it took this long. BNPL just grew so fast, got into almost every part of retail. It was really only a matter of time before the formal credit world had to account for it.
hmm And this move raises a really important question, especially given how common BNPL is now. What happens when more people start having trouble paying back these loans? And the data here is, well, it's a bit concerning. There's a definite trend. Back in 2023, studies showed about 18% of BNPL users were falling behind on payments. 18%. Okay, fast forward to February of 2025, that number jumped significantly, up to 25%. A quarter of all people using BNPL were reportedly falling behind. That increase in defaults really highlights the growing risk here, especially as, inflation squeezes budgets and people might be juggling multiple small BNPL loans without realizing how much it adds up.
Now, okay, there is some nuance. It's not all bad news, depending on how you use it. A study from a firm, they're one of the big BNPL players back in Feb 2025, it suggested that most people who had, say, 5 or more firm loans could actually see their credit scores go up, or at least stay the same. But, and this is the huge caveat, only if they paid every single installment perfectly on time. So yeah, for some people, especially maybe those new to credit, a good BNPL payment history might help build a positive record now that FICO's watching. But what about that 25%, the ones paying late? They are absolutely going to take a hit, no question. Their scores are likely going down, maybe quite a bit, and that makes it much tougher to get other kinds of credit later, like, say, a mortgage. So why did BNPL get so popular so fast anyway, and where does it kind of clash with how credit scores normally work? Our sources point to two big reasons for its appeal. First, and this is a major selling point, zero interest. Usually. If you make all your payments on time, typically, 4 payments over 6 weeks or maybe a few monthly ones, you don't pay a dime in interest. That's often way better than carrying a balance on your credit card, where interest can pile up really fast.
And the second reason, which is maybe more psychological, but now creates this really interesting tension with credit scoring, is the feeling, historically at least, that missing a BNPL payment wasn't as big a deal as missing a credit card payment. Fewer consequences, less impact. But think about traditional credit scores. Opening a bunch of new credit accounts quickly, especially credit cards, that's usually a red flag. It can signal risk, maybe financial stress, and it can actually lower your score. With BNPL, though, taking out several small loans in quick succession is kind of part of the convenience, right? Use it for groceries Monday, close Wednesday, maybe a gadget Friday. If FICO starts treating multiple BNPL accounts like multiple new credit lines, it could unexpectedly hurt the scores of people who use it frequently, even if they always pay on time. Just having many active accounts might increase their perceived credit utilization or risk profile in the eyes of the FICO model. This could really challenge how people have been using BNPL, thinking it was mostly consequence-free.
Okay, so let's tie this directly back to buying a house. What does this BNPL change really mean for you if you're hoping to get a mortgage, especially now? This is where it hits home, literally. When you apply for a mortgage, lenders look really closely at three main things: your income, your credit score, and your debt-to-income ratio, or DTI. That DTI ratio, it's not just some random number, it's super important. It tells lenders what percentage of your gross monthly income already goes towards paying off existing debts. It's their main way of figuring out how much more debt, like a mortgage payment, you can realistically handle without getting overextended. If your DTI is too high, that can be an automatic deal breaker, even with a great credit score. It affects if you qualify and definitely the interest rate you'll get.
Right. And connecting that to the bigger picture, with BNPL now being visible on FICO scores, mortgage lenders are going to have a much clearer, much more transparent, you could argue more accurate view of your total debt load. Before, all those little BNPL payments might have been flying under the radar. Lenders didn't necessarily see them. It was an incomplete picture. Now, a history of lots of BNPL loans, especially if you miss payments, or even if the total amount just pushes your DTI ratio higher, that's going to directly factor into whether you qualify for a mortgage and on what terms. It basically removes a blind spot lenders had, which will likely lead to, well, tighter lending overall.
And that's the big, potentially worrying implication here. Even fewer people might qualify for mortgages than already do. We're already seeing home sales stuck at these 40-year lows. So many potential buyers feel completely shut out by high prices and rates. Now, if more people get disqualified because their BNPL history bumps up their DTI or lowers their score, what's that going to do to sales? Probably push them down even further. It really feels like a double-edged sword, doesn't it? On one hand, yes, it leads to more honest credit scores, more transparency about real debt levels. That's probably good in the long run. But in the short term, it could create significant new hurdles to home ownership, keeping even more people on the sidelines in an already tough market. It just powerfully reinforces that fundamental financial advice we keep hearing, right? Minimize your debt. Increase your income. That's the core message from our sources. If nothing else sticks with you today, remember that. It's the magic key. It's the foundation for pretty much everything financial. Buying a house, getting ahead, eventually retiring comfortably, it all comes back to that.
Essential pointers for today's homebuyers.
Okay, so with all this complexity, the hidden tax, the BNPL changes, the high rates navigating the housing market today is definitely more challenging than ever, which makes being a really smart, savvy home buyer absolutely critical. Our sources shared some really essential, kind of hard-won tips from experienced real estate agents. These are super valuable for anyone thinking about buying. First up, and this is maybe the most fundamental piece of advice, but one a lot of people struggle with, just because the bank approves you for a $400,000 mortgage doesn't mean you should actually buy a $400,000 house. Instead, really aim to live comfortably below your means. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say the bank says, yep, you're good for $400. But maybe, with a bit more looking, a little flexibility, you find a perfectly decent house for $300,000 instead. That 25% difference, it's huge, absolutely massive.
Yeah.
It means your monthly mortgage payment is way lower, which frees up a big chunk of cash every month. And that extra cash is vital because, trust me, unexpected expenses will come up when you own a home. They always do. The roof suddenly needs replacing, the AC unit dies in July, property taxes and insurance creep up every single year. Having that buffer makes life so much less stressful. It lets you handle those things without panic. It lets you save more easily, get ahead faster. So many people who buy under their maximum approved amount instead of stretching right to the limit say later how much they appreciate making that choice. Especially as owning a home keeps getting more expensive. That 25% buffer, it can literally mean the difference between feeling constantly squeezed and having real financial breathing room when life throws you a curveball.
Yeah, that really speaks directly to financial resilience, doesn't it? The people who build in that buffer room from the start, buying less house than they technically could, they consistently express gratitude for that decision years later, especially now with rates higher and other costs rising. It's about creating that breathing room up front, making sure your home stays an asset, a source of security, not this constant financial drain that makes you feel house poor. No. It gives you the flexibility to ride out life's bumps without putting your biggest investment at risk.
Okay, next point. And this one sounds really boring, maybe tedious, but our sources say it's absolutely non-negotiable. The critical importance of reading the disclosures, all of them. You might not want to. It can be dozens, sometimes hundreds of pages of really dense legal stuff, technical jargon. But you have to read every single page of the disclosures in your purchase contract. You just have to, especially the seller's disclosure statement. That's where the seller is legally required to tell you about any known problems or significant issues they've had with the house. Was there a leaky basement they kept patching? Did the furnace conk out 3 times last winter? History of termites? Any big insurance claims? This is where the house's secrets often hide. Also, if the place is in a homeowner association, an HO, oh man, you absolutely 100% need to read all those HOA documents carefully, with a magnifying glass if you have to. Those HOA docs can contain bombshells, info about huge upcoming special assessments, weird restrictions on what you can do with your own property, maybe even pending lawsuits that could cost you a ton of money later. Spending the time to read this stuff up front, it can literally save you tens of thousands of dollars and massive headaches down the road. It's an investment in avoiding future pain.
It's genuinely fascinating how often people just skip this part. Or just skim it. They're excited, maybe overwhelmed by the whole process, and reading dense documents feels like homework. But those disclosures, they really do contain crucial information. Potential liabilities, hidden structural problems, rules about renting or renovating, big financial obligations you're literally signing up for. Like you said, buried deep in those HOA docs might be a mention of a $20,000 special assessment coming next year for a new roof. Or a lawsuit about faulty construction that could hit all homeowners. Stuff you really want to know beforehand. And look, if wading through all that legal paperwork feels like too much, our source strongly recommends hiring a real estate attorney. That's what they do. They can review everything, flag potential issues you might miss, make sure your interests are protected. It's a relatively small cost up front. They can provide huge peace of mind and potentially save you a fortune later.
All right, here's another golden rule. Something you can absolutely never, ever change about a house once you buy it. Location. You cannot renovate the location. Think about it. You can change almost anything inside or on the property after you move in. Paint, kitchen, floors, knock down walls, add a deck, whatever. But you can't pick the house up and move it somewhere else. Its location is fixed forever. And this is one of the biggest compromises our sources see buyers make, often just to save some money or get into the market faster. Maybe you find a cheaper house, but it adds 30 minutes to your commute. Or it's in a school district you're not thrilled about. Or the neighborhood just doesn't have the vibe you wanted. You might pull the trigger because the price is right, but then years later, you might really regret it because it's just in the wrong place for your life.
Okay.
And that you can't fix.
Exactly. And if you connect that to the big picture, it's really about trying to align the purchase with your longer-term life plan. Where do you see yourself in 10 years, 15, even 20? Too many people get caught up in the idea of the starter home. We'll just buy this for now, live here 5-7 years, then move up. But our source kind of challenges that. Maybe you don't have to buy a starter home. Maybe if you stretch just a little bit more up front or we're more patient, you could find a house in a location that works not just for today, but for the next big phase of your life. Getting into a location that really fits your long-term needs, thinking about schools down the road, commute changes, neighborhood growth, even noise or zoning might mean you can stay put much longer. And that avoids another incredibly expensive and stressful move later on, with all those closing costs, agent commissions, moving trucks, the whole ordeal. It's worth noting, too, that sometimes the real estate industry itself might subtly encourage more frequent moves, because, well, that's how agents make money. But it's usually not the best financial strategy for you.
Okay, and finally, our last essential pointer for home buyers. And honestly, this applies to more than just houses. It's kind of a life lesson. There is no such thing as a perfect house. It just doesn't exist. Look, it's totally fine, even necessary to have your checklist, your must-haves, your deal breakers. That's smart. It helps you focus your search, avoid wasting time on places that just won't work.
Right, but this raises that important question about expectations, doesn't it? While having that checklist and those firm deal breakers is crucial. I absolutely need 3 bedrooms, or I refuse to live on a busy street. You can't let the impossible quest for perfection paralyze you. Don't let it stop you from making an offer on a house that maybe meets, say, 90% of your needs, and, crucially, doesn't have any of your absolute deal breakers. For instance, you find a place, ticks almost all the boxes, great structure, good bones, none of your hard no items are there. That house might be absolutely worth going for, because you're almost certainly never going to find that magical unicorn house that has every single feature you ever dreamed of, in the perfect location, at the perfect price. If you do, buy a lottery ticket that day, because you're incredibly lucky. Most people don't find perfection in anything in life, right? A house, a job, even relationships. So if a house mostly fits the bill, if it avoids the things you truly can't live with, be flexible. Be realistic. That might just be the one that makes sense for you now and for many years ahead. Outro and...
So, wow, we covered a lot today in this deep dive. Some really big, often unseen forces that are messing with the housing market. We pulled back the curtain on those hidden chains that capital gains tax trapping millions of homeowners, really choking off inventory. Then we explored that surprising new twist with buy now, pay later loans and how FICO including that data might make getting a mortgage even tougher for some, potentially pushing sales down further by giving lenders a clearer, maybe stricter view of debt. And importantly, we tried to arm you with some really practical, essential advice for actually navigating this tricky market. Living below your means, reading everything, remembering location is key, and yeah, letting go of the myth of the perfect house. So what does all this mean for your future in housing, whether you're hoping to buy someday or you already own a home and are thinking about what's next? Here's one last thought for you to kind of chew on.
Yeah, here's something interesting to consider. Regardless of what happens with politics, right, whether Congress ever gets around to updating those capital gains laws or not, and regardless of exactly how FICO's new scoring with BNPL shakes out in the real world, there is a massive wave of housing inventory that is almost statistically guaranteed to hit the U.S. market over the next 10 to 20 years. It's coming. It'll happen one way or the other, either through policy changes finally unlocking some of those homes, or just inevitably through demographics. As a large generation of older homeowners passes away, their properties will come onto the market. And the stat shows something like 75% of inherited homes end up getting sold by the heirs anyway. So think about that. If you're a potential buyer feeling totally discouraged right now by the lack of options and crazy prices, what does this inevitable future surge of homes mean for you? Patience might pay off. Or, if you're already a homeowner thinking about your next move, how might this coming wave of inventory change your options, your timing, your strategy down the road? The housing landscape is definitely set for a major long-term transformation. And understanding these deep underlying forces we talked about today, that's really key to navigating whatever comes next.